JoJo's Bizarre Adventures is not only one of my favorite anime of all time, but it's also probably one of the more famous ones in recent memory. Known for its over-the-top characters, crazy strategies, even crazier rug pulls, and of course, Dio. And there have been a ton of different JoJo's throughout the years. Jonathan Joestar, his grandson Joseph Joestar, his grandson Jotaro Kujo, the Joestar name kinda gets lost when Joseph's daughter moves to Japan, Joseph's illegitimate son Josuke Higashikata, and a ton more. I am not joking when I say that Jesus, son of Joseph, is the first JoJo. Unfortunately, we are not here for Jesus. Instead, we are going to be looking at the second season JoJo, the delinquent known as Jotaro Kujo. But we're also going to be looking at the rest of the people he travels with and how they stack up into D&D as they attempt to put a stop to Dio yet again.
Somehow, in return.
Which, aside from the issue of Dio being a bloody vampire, he also managed to affect literally every single member of the Joestar bloodline that is currently alive. Because after a quick 100-year nap at the bottom of the ocean, Dio decided that just being a vampire wasn't OP enough, and gets his hand on a stand arrow. And because the body he's using here actually belongs to Jonathan, his adoptive brother, when Dio gets his stand, so does every other member of the Joestar family, even those who shouldn't have one like Jotaro's mom. For anyone who doesn't know, stands are the physical manifestation of your soul's fighting spirit, and stands have a super wide range of powers. Some can summon and control fire, others can de-age you if they touch your shadow, others are just the sun, but a lot of them just punch you really, really hard. And if your spirit or willpower isn't strong enough to control your stand, it could actually kill you. Jotaro's mom goes from super healthy to under constant care by the Speedwagon Foundation in like a day. And even Josuke, who was a kid at the time, got extremely sick, because they just weren't able to deal with the strain that a stand puts on a regular person. Now, Jotaro could handle this, but unfortunately for him, he had no idea what was going on. And after thrashing a bunch of thugs in a fight that he didn't think he was tough enough to do alone, Jotaro turned himself into the cops, convinced he was possessed by an evil spirit. He even went as far as to steal a cop's firearm and attempt to use it on himself to show that the spirit was there and protecting him. And this was his stand, something that he shares with his grandfather, Joseph, and a bunch of other people. But as per usual, we are going to save Jotaro for later, and look at some of the other people he teams up with along the way. Starting with the fortune teller that traveled all the way from Egypt with Joseph, Mohammed Avdol. Avdol's early life was really rough, his father dying during the Six-Day War of 1967, protecting his fellow soldiers from a grenade, leaving Avdol and his mother to survive off of her fortune telling and her now late husband's pension. Sadly, not long after this, she lost her own life as well, using her body as a human shield to protect a young girl from militia gunfire. But despite the loss of both of his parents, Avdol was inspired by their heroic, if not tragic deaths, and managed to keep himself out of trouble, using his fortune-telling and tarot card reading skills to skim by. Until eventually, while working as an assistant, he would run into good old Joseph Joestar and form a quick friendship, which would quickly prove vital as Joseph warns Avdol of Dio, and on his way back to his fortune-telling shop, Avdol will be confronted by the vampire, barely escaping with his life. And from there, he and Joseph travel to Japan, where the rest of the story can actually begin. And it's here that we learn about stands, and get our first taste of what Avdol's stand, Magician's Red, can do. And aside from just looking like a buff depiction of the Egyptian god of the sun Ra, this stand can control fire, and just being summoned can drastically raise the temperature of the area around him. Okay, so let's get the easy stuff out of the way real quick. Obviously, Avdol is a human, no ifs, ands, or buts there, and I use that to give him the lucky feat given that he is a fortune teller. It only seemed fitting. And for his background, I have once again embraced the idea of making my own background, this time called the Fortune Teller, giving him the Arcana and History skills on top of Magic Initiate for a free cast of Burning Hands. I also think his stats are really easy too. He's a Fortune Teller, and since those abilities are wholly unrelated to his stand, and as someone who grew up with a parent who did a lot of tarot card readings and other fortune-telling stuff, a lot of that is how you interpret the cards to the customer and telling them things in certain ways. So I take this as meaning he has a high charisma and wisdom, both knowing what to say and being able to read things about a person at a glance. Along with this, he roughed it out in the slums for a while, so a high con seems good, and seeing as he was the assistant to a very wealthy businesswoman, I think it's only fair to give him a decent intelligence too. Which sadly does mean his strength or dex is going to be the dump stat, and come on, I can't give him a minus to strength with muscles like his. And sure, he doesn't need it and dex saves are a lot more important, but damn it, I just can't. Okay, with that out of the way, let's take a look and see what Avdol and Magician's Red can actually do. Like I mentioned before, he can summon and control fire and often uses it to hold people down while burning them, which Not so fun fact, by the way, when you're on fire, you don't usually pass because of the flames. You expire due to lack of oxygen and smoke inhalation. It's a very slow death. But outside of just immolating people, he can do some really weird things with his fire, like controlling its shape to form numbers, or at one point making a radar to track people with fire. But he really only has 3 named abilities. The first 2 are Red Bind and Light Detector, like I mentioned, but he also has a giant fire blast in the form of Crossfire Hurricane, along with 2 variations of that attack. But of course, he can just start slinging fire around like no one's business. And there are actually a lot of good ways to be a fire mage in D&D, but there is something in his backstory that I haven't really touched on yet, but I think that will tell us what class fits best for Avdol. Stands are acquired in a few different ways. Sometimes you get shot with an arrow, and after recovering, discover that you have this creepy spirit thing following you now. Other times, the ability is tied to someone else, like Dio with the Joestars. But other times, you can just be born with a stand, and Avdol happens to fit right into that one, being born with Magician's Red and having years to master its abilities. Doesn't stop Jotaro from kinda rocking him during their first fight though. So since he's had these abilities since birth and not given them by some outside entity or anything like that, the Sorcerer is really our best bet. And while sometimes I have issues with fitting the Sorcerer into a specific build, there is a subclass that has a perfect fit for the Pyromantic Fortune Teller, the Pyromancer Sorcerer. It's not fully official, not from the new version, but it fits, and I don't care. Sadly, it doesn't come with any free spells, but that's fine. Avdol is gonna have plenty of those. What it does come with is the ability to burn anyone around you whenever you cast a fire spell, and considering that Magician's Red could apparently melt a steel beam mid-attack before it could hurt him, I'd say that is more than fitting for the first Pyromancy feature, Heart of Fire. I also think that his base Crossfire Hurricane is good enough for Fireball, if not Firestorm, since he can break it up to cover a wide area with flames, meaning he is at least level 13. So Avdol also gets the next feature, Fire in the Veins, so he can resist fire damage, not that it helped all that much when he was fighting the sun, and other creatures can't resist the damage from his fire spells. And being level 13, he also gets a few ASIs, getting Elemental Adept Fire so he can be a little bit more consistent with his damage, and the other one going into a +2 bump to his Charisma. Now outside of the Pyromancy subclass, there is another reason I went with the Sorcerer, and that is Metamagic. And the most important one of these whenever you're doing a single element caster is Transmute Spell, letting Avdol change any damaging spell he casts to fire damage as long as he has the points available. So Ice Storm is now a different Firestorm, Ice Knife is Flame Knife, and so on. Meaning Avdol can always deal fire damage, and because of Fire in the Veins, it's never going to be resisted, only ignored if they have immunity. But there's actually one more thing that lets us put Avdol at an even higher level. And funnily enough, it happens during episode 1, during his fight with Jotaro. At the end of that fight, Avdol turns his back to Jotaro and walks away, because at that point he had already done what he was asked to do, get Jotaro out of his cell. And he did this despite Star Platinum being mid-stabbing motion with a broken piece of the cell's bars. And why was he so confident that Jotaro wouldn't stab him? Because apparently it wouldn't have mattered. The flames from Magician's Red could apparently melt a steel beam before it could even come close to touching Avdol. Steel melts at 2500 degrees Fahrenheit or 1400 degrees Celsius. To make it go from cold steel to liquid metal on the floor that quickly, those flames are insane. And I think that is more than enough to justify the 14th level feature for the Pyromancer, Pyromancer's Fury, letting Avdol deal fire damage equal to his level whenever someone hits him with a melee attack. Oh, and it ignores resistance since it's not a spell, so Fire in the Veins or Elemental Adept wouldn't really affect it. And while that's mostly it for Avdol, there is one more big spell I want to cover. And no, it's not Wish, it's actually Sunburst, which normally deals radiant damage, but since Avdol has Transmute Spell, he can make it Flame Burst instead for 12d6 fire damage. And you get to blind whoever you pointed at. Easily Avdol's biggest Crossfire Hurricane and more than enough to cook the Frenchman. I did actually end up going to level 16 total for Avdol, mostly for his last ASI, which he uses to bump up his con. This is obviously after he gets the Observant feat and a +2 to his Charisma to max it out. Avdol might not have taken part in the most fights, but he was always the first to jump in when needed, to throw himself at a problem, and to throw himself in harm's way to protect others. I can't even tell you how much I hate Cream for how dirty he did Avdol. Oh, and Iggy too.
How the hell is he alive?
Okay, so Avdol's part was a little small, but he only fights a few times, only really beating out Joseph, who is an old man past his prime, and Iggy, who showed up near the end of the story. And unfortunately, like I said, he participates in very few fights and there just wasn't a lot of material for me to use for him. Plus, I have a lot more stuff to go over. And one of those things is to make sure that you are subscribed if you're enjoying the video, and if you want to see the other teams I'll be building in the future. You can even vote on what teams I'll be making if you go to my Patreon, which is linked in the description. JoJo actually tied with Dandadan, so you can expect that video next week. We're also going to be trying to up production here in the very near future, both in the quality of the videos and just how many we're pumping out every month, so be ready for that hopefully. And of course, if you are a new DM, one running into burnout, or you just don't know what to run for the session you have tomorrow and haven't planned for it, you should check out our partner, The Wandering Tavern. It's got battle maps, NPCs, plot hooks, unique magic items, airships, and a 10% discount code. Oh, wait, no, that's my discount code. But since it's here, you might as well use my code, GMG, again, for a 10% discount at the link below in the description. I will leave you guys with that, and we can get back to JoJo. Okay, so the plan at first, barring Jotaro, was to go down the line of what order people join the team in. So next should be Joseph, and I love Joseph, he is my favorite JoJo, with Josuke as a close second. But I hate to say it, Joseph kinda got power crept. Stands are just way stronger than Hamon or any martial arts. And... Huh? Oh, one sec, I wasn't expecting anyone.
Hi, it's me again, the Yogi Goblin. So what are you doing? What are you working on here? This is interesting.
Oh, hey, good to see you. I'm just building some characters from JoJo.
Okay, Stardust Crusaders. Okay, yeah, we've got Polnareff here and Kakui, and... Wait, where's Joseph? He's like the best Joestar in JoJo. He's number one. Why isn't he even here?
Well, like I was just saying, he got power crept, and I wasn't sure if I was gonna really add him since he only has a few fights.
Alright, okay, step aside. I'm gonna see if I can break down Joseph's Joestar and Stardust Crusaders as best as I can. So, hear me out. So in the previous campaign, the player playing Joseph was some sort of like arcane trickster rogue, multi-classed into some homebrewed Sun Soul monk, and this monk homebrew class was way more powerful than the original design, with the caveat though, that all the attacks that you made did Hamon damage, which only affected undead creatures. So, Joseph, being the cheeky guy that he is, asked the DM could he use his old character, but the DM warned him that he can, but there are two things that Joseph needs to consider. There are not going to be any undead in this campaign, which he changed later, but there was originally no undead in this campaign. And also, he could use his 20th level character, but they will have to start reverse leveling throughout the campaign, because he's old now. So, if you survive until the end of this campaign, you will actually have a level 1 campaign when everyone's fighting the big old boss. But you know, Joseph had to ask, he had to be a little cheeky, but in the end, admitting defeat, he begrudgingly makes a new level 1 character. So, using standard array, Joseph would come up with something like this for his stats. Your boy is a human, so with the new 2024 rules, he takes history as one of his skills because he's old now. So he then takes lucky as his origin feat because luck plays such a huge part in his victories. We'll then go with the charlatan for his background, taking deception and sleight of hand along with the skilled feat. Joseph is going to be a crazy skill monkey, great for role-playing, terrible at combat. But Joseph felt like he took a bit too much of the limelight in the previous campaign, so he wants to just be the best support he can be, but he has also told everyone that he refuses to be a heal bot, and so he's going to take the bare minimum when it comes to healing spells. Due to this background, Joseph gets a +1 to his dexterity and a +2 to charisma, but if you want to optimize things, you can always add that 2 to wisdom and rejig all his stats or whatever to best suit your own personal build tier. For our class, we're actually going to be a little weird here and choose Druid with the goal of entering the Circle of Stars at 3rd level. Not only is this great for the meme because he's a Joe Star and is his star Druid, but also he's kind of like a hermit now, and like Druids are hermits, right? So, but the main reason we're choosing the Star Druid is because it gives us 2 things. the ability to use our wild shape to empower ourselves in fun ways. Instead of being a bear, for example, we can now give ourselves cool long-range attacks, which we can flavor as Hermit Purple Thorns. But also, this subclass will give us access to some very neat scrying abilities later down the line. But also, Kakui called dibs on the wizard, so Joseph has had to kind of improvise. No divination wizard for Joseph, unfortunately. But to make sure that we gain some scrying abilities to locate Dio as quickly as possible, we're going to take up Augury as one of our second level spells, as well as locate object and locate animals or plants. So now we don't have to go breaking expensive cameras whenever we want to spy on Dio. We will take the observant feat at 4th level and increase our wisdom. And then there's nothing really noteworthy until Joseph finally reaches 6th level, gaining access to the Star Druid's Cosmic Omen feature. Not only can he use this ability, if the DM allows it, to capture some images of Dio, but he can also start telling people what they're about to say before they say it.
Next you'll say, please stop it, I beg you!
Please just stop it! I beg you! Ah!
7th level gives us access to one of the best spells yet, Locate Creature. Now we can finally start honing in on Dio's location. 8th level is another ASI, so we'll bump up our wisdom, and that just about wraps up things for Joseph's journey as a druid. And it's at this stage that Joseph starts missing his old days of playing a roguish scallywag. So at 9th level, he's gonna multiclass into Rogue. Old Joseph is coming back. More like young Joseph's coming back, but like, because he's old now. But like the old Joseph, he's back. We got him, guys. He's gonna do his fun shenanigans. Let's go. And he is gonna start expertising left, right, and center, starting with deception and sleight of hand, so he can better put pennies into a glass of liquid should the need ever arise. He also gains some weapon masteries. They're not super important, but we might as well take whips here, which we can reflavor as Hermit Purple. But our Thorn Whip cantrip is probably way better as a whole, so we're not really going to use that. But it's an option. It's there. We then get all those great roguish features, with Cunning Action being Joseph's favorite, reflavoring the Disengage and Dash action as the Joestar's secret technique. Then come 3rd level, we're going to become an Arcane Trickster so that we can turn our Hermit Purple invisible as a reflavored Mage Hand. So we can start tinkering with random video game consoles if we roll well enough on a sleight of hand check, should that situation ever arise. Our ASI at 12th level is going to go to increase our dexterity as we start to get tricksy again. And at 13th level, we level up the Joestar secret technique to new heights as we unlock Uncanny Dodge. And then to round things off, we're going to gain another expertise at 14th level, taking up Investigation and Perception. And then finally, the Joestar secret technique reaches its final form as we unlock Evasion.
Run for your life!
And this is the sole technique that is going to allow us to somehow survive all the way until the very end of this campaign. So then we can be an absolute troll, both at the end of the game and in the 3rd campaign that's gonna come after this. We're gonna keep going. We're gonna play an even older version of ourselves. We're just gonna have a great time, and that's what we're here for. We're here for the lols. We're here for the shenanigans and the memeing and everything. That's what this man is all about. I give it back to you, my lord.
Yeah, thanks for stopping by, man. Oh, wait, before you go, about that window you jumped through last time.
Bye.
Hey, wait, and he's gone again. Through the same window. Great. Anyway, despite my window, that was actually a really solid build for an older Joseph. I love the use of the Star Druid, since Druid can be really hard to work with, but mixing that with Rogue and different spells for his rug pulls just kinda works. That and putting in the Joestar secret technique earns Goblin a few extra points. This also means that I don't need to make an excuse for not building him myself, and I can move on to the next character to join the crusade against Dio, Kakyoin, who in the age-old trope of enemy to friend, starts off being under Dio's mind control. And before this, he had a fairly normal, if not lonely life, being kind of an isolated kid. Not because of any strange circumstances, but he just couldn't socialize well. Why? Because no one else could see his friend, Hierophant Green, his weird, tentacly stand. Now, like with everyone else here, because I'm not making Dio, Kakyoin is a human, so I'll probably stop mentioning that from now on. The backgrounds, not so much. And with Kakyoin's talent for painting, I think the artisan background fits really well. Even if Araki kind of forgets about the other powers he has. Like, he never uses this paint thing here again throughout the entire show. But yes, the artisan background gives him the crafter feat, which I'm sure he'll use, and because Kakyoin has his stand since childhood, I think the origin feat Magic Initiate for Magic Missile will be his very first Emerald Splash. It never misses. And before we get into any details about his fight with Dio or other stands and how those go, I think we should take a look at his stats. And I think something like this should work pretty well for what I have in mind. Kakyoin is fairly intelligent, being the only one who was able to figure out what was happening with Death 13 and being able to leave himself clues. So that means a high intelligence and I also think high wisdom. The rest of his stats are fine, his dex is okay. Charisma is okay despite him being kind of antisocial. When around other stand users, he isn't nearly as reserved. After that, strength and con are low. Again, he's buff but he really doesn't need it, and well, we'll get to why his con is as low as it is in a bit. But before that, I think it's time we talk about how we're going to actually get Hierophant Green, because his stand is really weird. He's kind of a long-range stand, and while he has a humanoid shape, he can also deconstruct into a bunch of tentacles for different reasons. Using said tentacles like ropes to grab people, puppeteering people from the inside, he only uses this ability once, or he could just stab you. Now, with how this stand works, there are a few different options, but I think our best option for Kakyoin is to start off as a wizard, and as soon as he can, he is going to jump over to the Order of Scribes. And at least for now, he's only here for 6 levels to get the 6th level feature, Manifest Mind, letting him summon Hierophant Green from his spellbook. He can go as far as 300 feet away from Kakyoin, and any spells that Kakyoin casts can come out of Hierophant Green instead. And he can change the damage type from whatever it normally is to force damage thanks to the second feature from this class, Awakened Spellbook. And while this version of Hierophant Green's existence isn't directly linked to Kakyoin, if it dies for any reason, he does have to finish a long rest before he can summon it again. And since we have the first part of Hierophant Green, let's stop with the wizard here and get some of the more tentacly stuff out of the way. So there's a reason that I went out of my way to make sure Kakyoin has at least a 13 charisma, because next Kakyoin is going to make a pact with Hierophant Green so he can become a Fathomless Warlock. But only for enough levels to get the Warcaster feat and the main thing, Tentacle of the Deep. So Kakyoin can summon one of Hierophant Green's tendrils as far as 60 feet away and smack someone with it. This only takes a bonus action, and it's repeatable on every one of his turns as long as he has a bonus action to burn. He can also grab Eldritch Blast for even more versions of Emerald Splash. And even though it's only a few level dip, this fits really well with the wizard since they typically don't do a whole lot with their bonus actions. And sure, Kakyoin doesn't use this ability all that much, but he did stab Tower of Grey on a plane using this, and honestly, he should have done it a lot more. Hierophant Green could have technically been a lot stronger if Kakyoin just stabbed people with him. He also technically gets a swimming speed here, and I mean, he can swim, so I guess that tracks. And so far with all that, this puts Kakyoin at level 11, and the rest of his levels are going to go back into the wizard. But he's not so much here for any more of the subclass abilities. More just for the spells to kind of round out Hierophant Green, like Avard's Black Tentacle, Bigby's Hand, Hold Monster, and even though he only did this once, he can still use Dominate Person if need be. And with these spells, we're going to get Kakyoin's most impressive ability, his 360-degree Emerald Splash, where he uses Hierophant Green's strange body to create a massive web of tentacles that when touched cause Emerald Splash to attack instantly. And not only from the one part you touched, but every other part of this massive web also fires at you. So you touch any bit of it and you suddenly get a hailstorm in response. And I think our best way of going about that is with the 6th level spell Contingency. The actual settings for the spell might be a bit complex to actually get a 1-to-1 for this ability, but just say if Dio gets within 60 feet of you, fire off a force damage, Cone of Cold, Fireball, or really any other spell you want as long as you have Contingency already cast. But it does last 10 days, so you have plenty of prep time. Really the only way to not get blasted by this would be if, say, time was stopped and you could walk right up to the wizard while his spell can't go off and you put your hand on the quickest route to said wizard's heart, through his chest. This moment actually got me. I was so excited for Kakyoin and his Emerald Splash to actually not miss and do something really cool, only to see him flying across the rooftop. And that is sadly where Kakuin's story comes to an end. But he did get Joseph the parting gift of telling him the secrets to Dio's stand.
Emerald Flash! Then let me show you. What? There's no way. No one can just deflect the Emerald Splash.
Next up is the second to last member of the Stardust Crusaders, the Frenchman Jean-Pierre Polnareff. I have no idea if I said that right, I don't speak any amount of French. And just like with Kakuin, Polnareff started off as an enemy being under the control of Dio. But he started off his own adventures long before that. Just like Avdol and Kakuin, Polnareff is a natural stand user, having it since he was a child. But he only really started training with it after his younger sister was attacked and killed by someone that we'll get to shortly. But after that incident, Polnareff started training with his stand Silver Chariot, a close-range sword-fighting stand that focuses on speed and a flurry of attacks, being so fast that sometimes it feels like you're fighting multiple stands at once. Now, before any of the actual story, getting brainwashed by Dio, getting revenge, or joining the Stardust Crusaders to fight Dio, Polnareff worked as a private investigator, solving crimes and still looking into the killer of his sister. And during one of these investigations, Dio managed to take Polnareff under his control and sent him after Jotaro and the others. And I think this is the perfect setup for another custom background called the Private Investigator, which gives him athletics and perception, but also the alert feat. No insight though, he pretty regularly falls for enemy traps. And with his swordsmanship, big muscles, and inability to tell when someone is lying to him, I think we have a good basis for his stats, which is going to look something like this. High Dex and Con, he takes a massive beating during the fight with Cream, and not only manages to pull through, but actually surprise attacks Dio during his fight with Jotaro. His strength is decent, again, big muscles, followed by his charisma, he does seem to get his flirt on quite a bit, intelligence, and because he seems to fall for pretty much every trick in the book, Polnareff is dumping wisdom. Thankfully though, he won't really need wisdom with what I'm going for, since I think the best way for Polnareff to get Silver Chariot, who is shown on many occasions to have similar if not better fencing skills than Polnareff himself, is going to be for him to start off with a couple levels in the Echo Knight Fighter subclass. And with this subclass, Polnareff can summon Silver Chariot by using the first feature, Manifest Echo. It's not as tough as Silver Chariot is in the show, but no matter how many times Silver Chariot goes down, Polnareff can just resummon him as a bonus action. He can also have all of his attacks come from Silver Chariot, or split them up between himself and the stand. It can even make opportunity attacks for him. And even better with the second feature, Unleash Incarnation, he gets an extra attack from Silver Chariot. And he's going to stay on this path for a while, going from 3rd level all the way to 11th level, picking up Echo Avatar on the way at level 7, which he can't really use if you want to stay true to Polnareff. But he does get the feature Shadow Martyr at level 10, letting Silver Chariot jump in the way of danger and take a hit for somebody if he needs to. On the way to level 11, he's also going to take the Defensive Duelist feat for some higher AC. Rules are unclear if the Echo could also use this reaction this way, but I would rule that it can. And I know Polnareff doesn't really wear armor, but the Echo has the same AC as the user, and Silver Chariot is wearing functional armor, so feel free to grab at least a breastplate if you are going to play Polnareff. And since Polnareff is a fighter, he gets a whole bunch of feats, so he's also going to grab the Piercer feat because him and Silver Chariot both use a rapier, and finally a +2 to his dex to max it out. But after getting a second extra attack at level 11, Polnareff is actually going to grab his secret once per day technique that isn't really once per day, by taking a break from fighter and jumping over to the Swashbuckler Rogue. Which means that if he does need to step back from a fight, as long as he takes a swing at the opponent, they can't swing back. But more importantly, he can access sneak attack without having to have an ally nearby. This combined with maybe a throwing knife or a heavy crossbow is really the best way I can think to mimic Silver Chariot firing his sword out of the hilt. And Polnareff really only does this ability once, well, technically 2 times, but the second time it doesn't even work. So it's really not that big of a deal to stretch and get. I just thought a few levels of Rogue might help him out. Now before we go back and get the rest of his levels, I think it's time we tackle something about Silver Chariot. That being its damn near relativistic speeds. During a fight with another stand user, who happens to be the same man that killed Polnareff's sister, because of course he also has a stand, Silver Chariot managed to attack said stand mid-flight, which at first doesn't really seem like much of a feat, but the stand he attacked is known as Hanged Man, who travels between reflections as a beam of light. He would hide in a reflective surface, attack your reflection, damaging you in the process, and then move to another reflective surface at the speed of light. Even eyeballs could be used. And yes, they technically had to set it up so there was only one path that Hanged Man could go, but Silver Chariot started moving after Hanged Man did, so he caught him mid-flight. He didn't move there first. And without teleportation, I can't really make an Echo move at the speed of light. Huh? Oh, right, technically the Echo can teleport, so yeah. Okay, with that little issue out of the way, we can now get back to Polnareff's levels. And he only has a few of those left, and I think that's fair. His last real fight is with Cream fighting alongside Iggy, and that really messed him up on a physical and emotional level. Rip Avdol and Iggy. But in this, Polnareff managed to get the drop on Cream and give him that one last push he needed to finish the fight. And for getting through a fight that really should have ended in his death given the difference in abilities between him and Cream, I think this puts Polnareff right at level 14 of Fighter, giving him a maximum level of 17, right alongside his other dead friend, Kakyoin. Wow, he has a lot of dead friends. Polnareff is a weird guy, but not a bad one. Sure, he has his quirks and rough spots, but he is a warrior at heart, putting the safety of others above his own when it really matters, and making sure to avenge his fallen allies.
My name is Jean-Pierre Polnareff, for the honor of my dearest sister's soul, and so my good friend Avdol can rest peacefully in heaven above. I'm going to hurl you into the depths of despair! Prepare yourself!
Okay, before we hop into the final character, I just want to remind you guys to go check out the Ugly Goblin's channel. He does some amazing stuff over there, so go look at his stuff. Finish this video, then go watch his stuff. And this leaves us with only one more character since I'm not building Iggy, at least not here. And that is Jotaro Kujo, the JoJo of this season, who, let's be honest, can be kind of a dick. But despite his rough and scary exterior, Jotaro's actually a really nice guy, he just rarely ever shows it. Like when he's convinced he is possessed by an evil spirit that is making him hurt people without meaning to, he turns himself into the cops and has them keep him in jail. He even threatens people who try to get him out. And it's not until he is shown that it's not an evil spirit and instead his stand does he come out after realizing that he has full control over it. So clearly Jotaro is a bit of a thug, and as you can see, a human, both of which I am using to get him 2 feats. Obviously first is going to be tough given how tough he is later and how much of a beating he can take, and again, Magic Initiate Wizard. Mostly just to cover basic stuff that Star Platinum can do, like grabbing stuff with his hands and blocking attacks with the shield spell, even if that one is only once per day. And after all of this, including beating the crap out of Kakyoin and pulling a flesh bud out of his head, the party can actually start on their journey, or their crusade, to find and kill Dio. Since you know if they don't, Holly, Jotaro's mom and Joseph's daughter, is going to die due to the strain her stand is putting on her. Oh, and Josuke too, but they don't really know about him yet, so... Now despite his looks, Jotaro isn't just a thug. He's actually extremely smart. Not in the book way, at least not yet, but when it comes to reading people, picking apart his opponents, and coming up with plans on the spot, which to me speaks to a very high wisdom score. And of course I'm gonna give him a high strength score, just look at him. His main method of attack is to punch you in the face until not even your mother could recognize you. And on top of being jacked, he has Star Platinum, who is classified as a close range stand with high speed, strength, and precision, able to see a fly in the darkness of a single picture taken via Joseph's spirit photography, and sketch it out so perfectly that they could easily tell what kind of fly it was and use that to start tracking Dio. Now when it comes to attacks, he has a few notable ones. Starfinger, where he just extends his fingers to poke you really hard. He can accurately hit targets with bullets fired from his stand's hands. And of course he has the classic Stand Rush. Star Platinum has also outclassed many other powerful stands, kept up with a buff Silver Chariot, see the bit I mentioned before about him moving near the speed of light, and a bunch of other ridiculous feats. But let's move on to something that I'm sure most of you saw coming when you clicked on this video, because there is a single class and subclass in this system that fits for a stand like Star Platinum. One that lets you summon a manifestation of your soul to punch vampires in the face, the Astral Self Monk, which at level 3 lets Jotaro summon Star Platinum in the form of a pair of astral arms. Jotaro can use these arms to punch instead of his own, and they have the option of using his high wisdom or strength instead of dexterity. And fitting with the slight range increase that Star Platinum has over Jotaro himself, any attacks made with these astral arms have an increased reach of 5 feet. Now all this stuff is pretty basic for Star Platinum, and I honestly think when Jotaro does get his stand, he's already way above level 3. And I say that because it's pretty clear that early on, Jotaro already has access to some other monk abilities, like Unarmored Defense and Deflect Attack when, oh no, somehow the Emerald Splash was deflected, or better yet, when he fires a bullet point blank at himself and Star Platinum catches it. Oh, and because we're treating Emerald Splash as a bunch of different variety of spells that deal force damage, this would actually put Jotaro, when he starts his journey, around level 13 so he can change Deflect Attack to Deflect Energy. Jotaro might be a little busted, but during those 13 levels, Jotaro is going to grab some very important stuff to put Star Platinum at the same level he is when he gets him, like maxing out his wisdom for the biggest punches from Star Platinum, along with taking the Martial Adept feat to get Starfinger via lunging attack. This also means he starts off with 2 more of the Astral Self Monk features. Visage of the Astral Self letting him summon Star Platinum's head, which also kinda comes up really early, given that with this he can see in darkness and magical darkness, so seeing that fly in the picture shouldn't really be an issue, even if that's not how dark vision technically works. And he has advantage on insight or intimidation checks, both of which would come in very handy during the Darby the Gambler fight. And the other one he gets is Body of the Astral Self, letting him fully summon Star Platinum for attack and defense. Now the Deflect Energy portion of this feature is redundant since we already got Deflect Energy, so instead we're going to look at the other part, which just lets Star Platinum deal extra damage once per turn whenever he hits any of his punches. And Jotaro kinda starts at this level. Not that your DM would let you do this if you were playing a Jotaro coded character, but I think this gives a good idea of why he just kinda steamrolls most of the Zand users, and a lot of the ones that give him trouble, he couldn't just punch in the face right away. Again, Darby, the lovers, other Darby, and honestly I think Jotaro stays around here for a while, leveling up here and there, getting perfect focus at level 15 so he's always ready for a fight, and bumping up his con at level 16 so he can take a bit more damage. And of course using the Joestar secret technique if he ever needs to regroup, which happens like one time. And until the fight with Dio, there really isn't anyone that can go blow for blow with Jotaro. But again, that is until the Dio fight, because Dio is a whole nother monster. And I would say Jotaro went into this fight at level 16, meaning he only leveled up 3 times throughout the entire trip to Egypt. But not only is Jotaro on the back foot for a lot of this fight, having to contend with a stand just as, if not stronger than Star Platinum, but this same stand can spam a time stop ability. And I think during this fight, Jotaro actually levels up to level 17, getting his last Astral Self feature, Awakened Astral Self, letting Star Platinum act almost like armor, increasing Jotaro's AC and letting him attack even more times to keep up with the flurry of attacks from Dio. And at first this might seem like enough. Jotaro was pushing Dio back, dealing damage too fast for him to actually heal properly. But of course there's always a phase 2 in a boss fight. And after Dio gets just a second to recover and uses Joseph like a juice box, and drinking a Joestar's blood turns Dio into a full vampire, I think that's what it is, and it increases his time stop from somewhere around 5 seconds all the way up to 9 seconds. 9 seconds where he can do whatever he wants, uninterrupted. But despite this, Jotaro manages to push past this new barrier, breaking down the walls between Star Platinum and the world even further. Not by leveling up just once, but twice. And this time it's actually into a completely different class, because I'm sure any JoJo fans know, there is one major ability from Star Platinum that I haven't talked about yet. Because during this fight, as Dio continues to spam time stop over and over and over again, it's shown that Jotaro can not only see, but is able to break into and even act during frozen time for a few moments. Because Star Platinum and the world are very similar, almost identical stands. And the more Jotaro does this, the longer he's able to act during frozen time. Until when pushed back again between a rock and a road roller, he takes 2 levels in Fighter. One for second wind since he's gonna need a breather, and the other one is for Action Surge, which is really the only way I can think to give Star Platinum a time stop-like ability. Mostly just reflavoring the extra action as something you do during said time stop. Now before you say anything, I did look at the epic boons for 2024 and 2014 to see if there was anything I could work with, but sadly no. Action Surge is really the best option. Even the 9th level spell Time Stop wouldn't work, because the moment you attack them, make them make a saving throw, or move too far away, the spell just ends. But that said, let's take a look on the bright side of this. Having Action Surge lets Jotaro make 9 attacks, each one dealing 1d12 plus 5 damage, and one of those is hitting for 2d12. So if all those attacks hit, that is 10d12 plus 45 force damage, which pretty much nothing resists. And thankfully that is just the right amount to finally take Dio down so they can leave him in the sun to bake. Now, I know there is a lot more for Jotaro in the future. He appears in Diamond is Unbreakable, Golden Wind, I think he's in Stone Ocean, I haven't really watched that one yet. And in these, he does get a bit stronger, even if he takes a hit to his time stop, but maybe I'll save that for when I'm doing the Morio Warriors or further beyond that. Anyways, as always, I want to thank my testers and, of course, my patrons. You guys are awesome. I couldn't make all these without you, and I'm sure some of the builds would be just a little bit jankier if I didn't have a few other people to look over them and catch the weird stuff I do. But that is going to do it for now. I will see you all next time, and as always, have a wonderful day.